guys, I'm super excited. On this episode, we're working on a 1984 Porsche 944. Now, this just got delivered. It is wet and freezing outside, and the car is pretty trashed. It's valued at about $500. Now, I am working with a non-profit organization called Cars for Kids. We've all heard the jingle, 1-800-CARS. That's these guys, and basically what happened is somebody donated this car, and they received a $500 tax donation. The organization, meaning Cars for Kids, called and said, hey, would you be willing to donate your time and be able to bring this car back to its former glory or close to it so that we can get more money for it at auction? Because this thing, we don't want to part this out. They don't want to destroy it. It's a Porsche, and they know that I love Porsche, and I can sort of hopefully bring this back, get more money for the charity, get more money for the donation, and shoot a really cool, fun video. So that and a whole lot more on this Porsche 944.
When I initially spoke to Cars for Kids about restoring the 944, I was super excited and happy to help. When the flatbed rolled up to my garage, I quickly realized I might be biting off a little bit more than I can chew. Even though it was raining and wet outside, the paint still looked incredibly trashed and the wheels were toast, the interior was moldy, and the engine would be full of mouse poop and nests. As the car was lowered into the driveway, we noticed the back driver's side wheel was completely locked up, which added another layer of complexity for moving it into the garage. The flatbed operator wanted the driver's side window down in anticipation of actually pushing it into the garage, so he hooked up a jumper box for the power windows, and I tried to start it when I was inside just to see if the engine had seized. It obviously didn't start, but the engine was moving, which was promising. He tried everything possible to loosen the rusty back caliper. He hit it with a hammer and even used the flatbed to put more weight on the back brake pad in hopes that it would pop free, but we had no luck. Plan B was to jack up the rear and gingerly push it into the garage, which worked. With the flatbed gone, I inspected the car a bit closer, but not too close because it stunk like a mixture of wet leaves and mold. With the registration almost 19 years overdue, the engine compartment looked like a home for rodents or squirrels or whatever in that time sitting unused. If you look closely, you can see a trail of mouse poop leading to the nest, so you know at one time something was living in there. The heat liner had disintegrated years ago and was slowly dropping little flakes everywhere, but there was engine oil on the dipstick, which was really good, and it wasn't as sludgy as expected, so that was good too. One of the worst parts were the wheels. They were completely gone and not much could be done from a detailing perspective, but we'll have more on this later. The seats, sun visors, knobs, B-pillars, and basically everything else had some level of mold on it, as the rear hatch seemed to be leaking, which I discovered later after removing the rear carpets. My favorite part of doing these forgotten cars is opening the trunk and seeing what's left behind. In this case, it was several 944 repair manuals, hazard reflectors, and an old umbrella with yet another nest inside. Later on, we actually found the original toolkit, which was really cool and valuable for the new owner. The first step was to get the car up in the air and off the flat tires using my quick jack. It's obviously really simple to use. First, you plug in the hydraulic pump into an outlet, the two hoses into the pump itself, and then each hose into the lift. Then push the up button when aligned under the lift points underneath the frame. The one thing you do need to do is make sure that you watch it as it goes up to make sure that the rubber bumpers go exactly underneath the lift points, because the jack has a scissor-like motion as opposed to straight up and down, so you may need to readjust those bumpers as it goes up and touches the underneath of the car, so be aware of that. With the car off the ground, I replaced the filters on my 3M half-face respirator because of the heavy mold. The 601 organic vapor unit comes with an extra particle filter inside the cartridge as it's being shipped, so make sure you remove the extra one, then flip over the single unit before putting the top on and then twisting it onto the mask. Next, Dan and I removed all the loose items in the car and disassembled the interior to find the source of the moisture. While I was removing the trunk carpet and plastics, Dan was removing the front seats, which revealed some interesting treasures that had long since seen the light of day or someone's lips. Much like a detective combing through a suspect's garbage for clues, this guy's junk is almost a cliche of what you might expect from the owner of a Porsche 944. You have kids' books because of the tiny back seats, golf ball containers, candy wrappers, and women's red lipstick. I think Ferdinand would be proud. With pretty much everything that could be removed out of the car, we first vacuumed the loose dirt to avoid clogging the shampoo machine and to get a better sense of the condition of the carpet for pre-treating. Once reasonably vacuumed, I mixed water and lather in a designated aerator, as I would need to blast everything in the interior with a cleaner and wanted it to soak a bit before agitating with a brush, a scrub pad, and a steam machine. While Dan was hitting the seats with steam, I followed up with a brush and towel to scoop up the now lifted grime. We repeated the same steps on the doors. Next, we clean the tight or intricate areas like the shifter, radio buttons, e-brake handle, and the top of the shifter knob with our tiny toothpicks. Afterwards, I pre-treated the carpets with ammo shag and let it soak for a few minutes, then steamed the floor to release the years of crusty stains on the front floors and back carpets without having the back glass crush me after I knocked over my hockey stick / strut bar. While I was prepping the carpets, Dan filled the Mighty Light shampoo machine with distilled water and followed up behind the steam with hot water extraction. The color difference afterwards was even more obvious in person than it was on camera. Then I cleaned the seats and cushions we pulled out of the car earlier with lather and a scrub pad. Once I was done, Dan tossed in a fresh battery on the cordless fan to help remove stale air and dry the carpets quickly. The removable mats were also pre-treated and steamed, but we noticed that they held a lot more dirt than anywhere else for obvious reasons. So in this case, I would normally just power wash the fibers, then wet vac and let dry. However, since the mats were disintegrating from the backside and the Porsche logo was unraveling, I thought it would be safe and more fun to just use compressed air and a tornador to lift the embedded dirt before vacuuming. Now, for the record, if the carpet isn't falling apart like this one, save yourself the mess and just power wash the fibers. It's way easier. Now, the dirt flying everywhere, although visually interesting, covered everything: the floor, the camera, and our clothes. So avoid this technique if mats are strong enough to handle the pressure washer. We hit it again with steam and extraction, and it looks as good as it's going to get for now. Then we repeated the same steps on the trunk carpet as well. The 50-50 was quite noticeable. Once done, we emptied the machine to see what was living in the carpet for over 19 years. I'm using the Mighty Light 2 Pro detailing machine here, but I've also used the Bissell Spot Clean Pro when I need to travel light. Here, I'm using it on a Mercedes 280 SL that hadn't been moved in over 37 years, and obviously the carpet was crazy moldy and gross, but it worked great. This episode has been seen over 14 million times in just a few months. Click the link above if you haven't seen it yet. The before and after is amazing, and the reveal to an 83-year-old man by his son is a huge tearjerker, so be forewarned.
But for as long as 1982, 37 years?
I was born in 81.
I have shirts older than that.
Yeah.
While all the carpets were drying, we performed minor ashtray surgery to remove very old and sticky candy that was wedged up in the back of the tray. And once the game of detail operation was getting old, we just filled the tray with strong APC and let it soak overnight to see what it would look like in the morning. Next, we focused on the engine compartment, as the mechanic would need to spend some time delousing before he could even start the mechanical repairs. The heat liner was dry rotted and brittle, so we hard carded it first because it was falling on us as we started to inspect the engine, so it was logical to start here. Next, Dan vacuumed the fallen headliner within the engine compartment while I was removing the various homes from all the warm nooks and pockets near the firewall. With most of the loose stuff vacuumed up, we coated the engine in ammo frothy and scrubbed and brushed 19 years of gunk, followed up by a lot of microfiber towels that we would later toss in the trash because they really stunk. I used compressed air to hit the tight spots and to help frothy evaporate. On the intake manifold, we used Barkeeper's Friend and a stiff bristle brush to remove some of the baked-on oxidation or discoloration. It didn't completely remove it, but it certainly helped bring back some of the original sheen. During the cleaning, I noticed the previous owner sprayed clear coat on the engine compartment as sort of a semi-permanent shine or pop to the plastics. As you can see, it was flaking and cracking and doesn't look very good, but he was ambitious to say the very least. Once cleaned up, I added a bit of ammo mud dressing where I could to help the auction pictures pop a little bit in the next few days. With our screwdriver / hood strut removed, we closed the hood to focus on the paint, but first we removed the destroyed wheels, revealing a very old and rusted out calipers and rotors. I scraped away as much as the old caked on mud as possible from the wheel wells before lightly rinsing with a power washer just to be able to see what needs to be fixed. Afterwards, I quickly frothed the paint to loosen the years of caked-on junkyard dirt and dust, and I didn't use a power washer here because I wasn't 100% sure where the interior leak came from, so I avoided using heavy water just to be safe. After a few wipes, the microfiber towel was filthy, but the goal here is just to remove enough junk to prevent the buffing pad from clogging up even faster due to the surface dirt. Once full, I put the dirty towels in a separate dirty red bag and got a fresh towel from the clean bag and continued on the nose of the Porsche. At first glance, the paint looks so much better during the wipe, but it's actually just an illusion due to the lubrication or the moisture reflecting the light, which makes Frothy so effective as a safe hoseless cleaner as it's lubricating the paint during your wipe. But watch as the humectants evaporate. It reveals the original swirled and scuffed paint underneath. Once all cleaned up, my next step was to perform a test spot in my usual area, the back passenger side quarter panel. For this, I'm playing around with a new leveling fluid and a specially made microfiber pad that retains its firmness without overheating because I prefer to use a bit more downward pressure than most, especially on a large throw machine. I still have a ways to go, but the first test looked pretty good. Anyways, once the quintessential 50-50 shot was done, I noticed two things. One, the paint has the potential to come back to life, which was pretty cool. And number two, this particular panel has clear coat, which is not something I was expecting. Nonetheless, I finished leveling the remainder of the quarter panel and found what looked like crow's feet underneath the gas tank door.
Okay guys, I'm behind the camera now. I just shut off the lights. As you know, when you're polishing and you're trying to get precise, turning off the lights is actually a good thing, so you only have one source of light. Anyhow, obviously there's the gas tank. And then you notice here as I was polishing, you can see if I pull the camera in closely, do you see all that cracking? And you see how it goes down here, and I'll do it with the shape of the light right now, kind of like this shape. And it goes up, and you can see it stops right at the gas tank. So clearly, this is caused from spilling of gas. Now, the first thing that you would think, as I pull in here, what does that look like? Most of you are going to say, oh, that's crow's feet. Well, I wasn't 100% sure. It kind of looked like crow's feet. And so then, of course, I called the master, Kevin Brown, and we had a little chat about it. And it makes more sense now. So this is what we call crazing. So crazing is the type of thing where as the gas spills out here, it's a volatile chemical, obviously, so it evaporates. And it makes this area very brittle. And so it's a top-down type of thing, meaning something was spilled on it, in this case gasoline. It becomes very brittle and sort of looks like a mosaic kind of tile. Hopefully that's focusing. Can you see that there? Pretty fascinating, right? So the difference between this and crow's feet, let's say, is crow's feet is somewhat similar. That's why it was confusing to me. Looks obviously like crow's feet in a beach or sand or whatever, but that's caused from underneath, meaning the primer gets heated up. So let's say, for instance, on the hood or the radiator, usually sometimes you get it right in this area when it gets really hot with the hose underneath, and it heats up the primer, and the primer cracks underneath, and then it looks like crow's feet. In this case, because something else was on it, gasoline, it was coming from top down instead of bottom up. So that's kind of what's indicating that this would be crazing versus crow's feet.
While I was polishing the rest of the passenger side paint, on the other side of the car, Dan was removing the old duct tape and the very old and very cracked clear bra around the wheel arches. When they become this dried out, the process is extremely tedious and requires a steam machine, plastic razor blades, and monk-like patience. First, heat up the bra with the steam and then use the plastic razor blade to get under the top layer, which sort of crumbles as you do it, leaving behind the glue. Now, in some cases, you can use a strong chemical, but on older cars with thin paint like this one, you're running the risk of shocking the paint and causing more issues down the road from rapid expansion and contraction of the paint. So use steam, listen to some music, because it's going to take a while and your fingers are going to hurt. With the old bra removed, you can use dirty or what I call throwaway microfiber pads to clean up the last bits of remaining glue, with the understanding that you're going to have to throw the pad away when you're done. So I keep these old pads around that I no longer use on the paint for just this purpose, to get the most out of my old supplies and to save my fingertips when possible. After everything was compounded, we finished up with a light polish to remove the very minor compounding swirls to bring the paint back to near 90%-ish without removing too much of the remaining paint on the car. For this, I used 210 and a yellow foam pad. On the start of day 2, we scrubbed the ashtray with a stiff bristle toothbrush, then managed to gently remove the plastic cover without breaking the clips off camera, and used 4/0 steel wool and barkeepers to remove most of the stains. Then, Dan cleaned the windows with a flat-edge squeegee and several microfiber towels, and razor-bladed the exterior lot numbers on the windshield and the rear hatch. Then he spent some time on the rear defroster lines, as these were caked up with mold or something sticky. Defroster lines are basically metal circuits that run electricity on the glass to transmit heat and defrost the area around the line. If the line is broken or scraped off, the circuit is broken and that area will no longer defrost. So using a razor blade is not a good idea here. Always wipe east to west along the circuit and not up and down across it to avoid potential issues. With the interior carpets cleaned, dried, and reinstalled, I massaged ammo mousse into the dried out seats to add a bit of moisture into the leather. Now keep in mind, with old neglected seats or interiors, you may need several applications because the material is just so dry and thirsty. We repeated the steps on the doors, dash, armrest, and back seats. Be sure to give a final wipe after a few minutes for a matte finish. Once all done, we reinstalled the back seat cushions and both front seats, and it started to look like a car we might be able to sell. For the final phase of protection, Dan used his master's airbrush kit with black touch-up in the reservoir mixed with paint thinner for the larger dings and paint chips, same one we used in the Eagle Talon video we removed from the woods a few summers ago, while I used a medical syringe with various size dispensing needles based on the thickness of the paint being applied and the size of the damage we're trying to fix. I'll have a full video on this technique in the future, but for now, it's a cheap and easy way to have a super precise touch-up placement. While Dan was working on the larger spots, I played with the front nose rock chips by gently compressing the plunger. Now, this can be tricky at first because sometimes too much can come out at once. If this is the case, then you need to decrease the size of the orifice used in the needle to restrict the paint flow. But if you spend a little time with it, you'll be able to figure it out, and it's a really cool tool. With the touch-up paint drying, I added ammo mud to the super crusty and brittle rear wing to bring back a little bit of the resiliency and color from its whitish or faded appearance. This actually required 3 applications because it was incredibly dry and incredibly thirsty. Now, going back to the original wheels, they were so far past detailing that I couldn't really do anything with it. So I quickly placed my Gold Cup 1s on the 9440 just to get a glimpse of its potential. And what it ended up doing is motivating me so much that I called my buddy George at Performance Industries and asked, hey, can you clean up these original wheels for me so I can take some really good auction pictures? And he's like, yeah, totally cool. I can do that for Cars for Kids, no problem. So I brought the wheels down to his shop in New Rochelle, New York. Now, a few days later, they were super heat cleaned, repainted, balanced, and ready for pickup, so I was really happy with that. For the very last step, I'm using my latest derivative of Reflex. This is number 65 to be exact. Now, I've spent a lot of time reformulating this product, and we're getting very close to creating what I envisioned in the lab months ago. When my testing is done and it's ready for shipping, I'll post a link in this video right here. In the meantime, if you want to get on the early adopters list, a sign-up link is in the description of the video. I'm super proud of where we are to date with this formula, but check this out. Here's a quick iPhone video I shot on the side of my car during testing a few weeks ago. One side beads and the other side sheets. Now, which do you think is better for the car? Again, there may not be just one right answer, and that's okay. But hopefully last week's video on the McLaren and the cooking lard that beads water has got you asking some healthy questions about what products you choose and what companies you support. Finally, a huge thank you to everyone who's been so supportive throughout the innovation process. It's taken some time to do, but man, it is so worth the effort, so thank you. After a few days of paperwork, the new owner, Kevin, arrived for the first time to see the car that was in the junkyard just a week earlier. He's in his early 20s and has never driven stick, and this would be the first car he's ever owned. So I was obviously curious about what drew him to this particular car, knowing it needs a lot of mechanical love and not the most practical car for such a young guy living in a city. As you can see, the paint is looking pretty good, but when it first came in here, it did not look very good. It's been sitting for a long time. There's residue and all kinds of junk on there, but one of my favorite parts is I go in and I look at the registration. 2001, so obviously 19 years ago, it was just registered, and I guess somebody drove it, but this thing was pretty gross when it first came in. So.
Funny enough, I think I would have been 5 years old then. But the man who I think would appreciate this car the most, my dad actually passed away that year, and he is probably the reason why I'm into Porsches, because he had a 911 SC that he took my mom on their first date in and sold it before I was born. And I just, there are weird things you do to connect with people from your past, and I think that my obsession with Porsches has been linked to that.
So with that, he was super excited to start fiddling with his Porsche, and I thought it would be a perfect moment to unveil his new wheels. He was super pumped, but obviously a little nervous with cameras everywhere, and he wanted to put them on the car just to get the car outside and take a look at it in natural light before the Speed Sport trailer came to haul it to the shop for repairs. With the car off the quick jacks, we needed to put them back on the go jacks just to get it out of the garage because of the locked up caliper. After he and I pushed the car outside, we spun it around and lined it up for the incoming trailer. The boys from Speed Sport tied a strap to the front tow hook, and with a flick of a button, the winch hauled the 944 up and inside. Now, at this point, as the car is going up in the trailer, I could really see the realization on Kevin's face that this was actually happening to him, and he was now the owner of this car, which really meant a lot to him. Once the trailer was all buttoned up, I made sure to give him all the binders and the manuals that I found in the trunk for some light reading later on, and the original toolkit, which was pretty cool.
I was going to ask you about the toolkit.
Finally, he wrote the donation check to Cars for Kids, and we were off to Speed Sport Tuning to diagnose just how much it would need to get back on the road safely. When we arrived, and while Carlos and Don were preparing to unload the trailer, I walked Kevin around the shop and his mind exploded as I showed him a few race cars, the Maserati Corsa that I did in an older video, and the sea of Porsches parked for the weekend. I can tell he knew that he was in the right place, so I was really happy that he seemed so excited. Now, as corny as this sounds, if you made it through the end of the video, this is kind of a fun little part here. Now, I've always been a firm believer in karma or the universe or whatever and doing the right things when no one's looking. So when the 944 was pushed off the trailer, the back wheel somehow loosened up in the 10-minute drive from my garage to their shop, which was really, really cool. Clearly, this isn't some big miracle, but as a car guy, I have to think that this was just like the Porsche gods finally giving us a break after pushing this car all around the driveway for a couple of days, and the car finally just letting go. With one last push from Kevin, his new old 944 was in the garage and would start the next leg of its journey in the hands of an excited young man and out of the junkyard for good.